Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, perhaps to some of you. Thank you for joining B2 Live session on GEO, Generative Engine Optimization, and how we can all navigate this new frontier in public relations. I'm thrilled to be joined today by Dan Lotsoff, who's the Chief Revenue Officer at Notified, our partner with Globe Newswire, and Emma Harney, who is the Director of Web Strategy and Experience at Rocket Software, who is a longtime V2 client. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
So the agenda for today, we're going to quickly go through some trend lines that we're watching that are really prompting this webinar, and I think support what a lot of the folks on this call are seeing and feeling and hearing. Then we'll pivot into how to turn some of that theory and those trend lines into practical action. We'll hear from Emma with kind of peer-to-peer insights on what Rocket Software is doing. They're among our most, I think, innovative and forward-leaning clients as it comes to GEO. And then we'll open it up to Q&A, though certainly we want this to be conversational, open dialogue. So at any time, plop a question in the chat. We'll do our best to answer it right away. The goal is really that, this is beneficial and practical, and you leave this webinar with tactical advice to go back and start implementing GEO best practices. So to get everyone warmed up with the chat function and hopefully people participating, wanted to kind of get a grounding in a few baseline GEO, state of the state in your personal life or professional life and at your workplace. So in the comments, when you think about how you personally search today and maybe for work purposes, how often are you using ChatGPT or an LLM over a traditional search engine like Google? Feel free to drop in the chat if you're doing it consistently, if you're still going to Google. I'm a little old school. I certainly still go to Google a lot. Though increasingly I find myself talking to ChatGPT. I don't know, Emma, Dan, do you have a preference here?
I definitely still do both. Trying to make it more of a habit to use LLMs first, I think. And I'd say probably ChatGPT or Copilot. We use a lot of Copilot.
Yeah, I would probably say getting more and more to probably 80-90% on ChatGPT. I just think that, for me, I like the questions that it asks afterwards, right? Like I like the thought process of not just giving me the answer I'm looking for, but then prompting the next question. So I find that helpful.
Yeah, great. It does look like we have some LLM leaning folks in the audience, so that's exciting. How often within your organization are you discussing AI impacts on your brand visibility? Is it all the time and kind of the topic du jour every day? Is it sometimes, or are you here because you realize you're probably not talking about it enough yet? Would love to understand from this audience on the phone or on the webinar how many folks are all in or just getting started. Right? All the time seems to be the answer. Emma, we'll save your answer to that, but Dan, what do you think? Is it something constantly for your business?
Yeah, it's every day, all day, night and day. If there were more hours, it would probably include those as well.
Yeah. I've been at 2 conferences in the past 2 weeks with comms folks, and the trend line was very much it's moving toward all the time. And to your point, Dan, we need more hours in the day to just address it.
Got it.
And what's one word you would use to describe how you feel about AI's impact on your brand's discoverability? This could be good, bad, indifferent, optimistic. Would love to hear from folks on the phone or on the line how you're feeling in the chat. And then maybe Emma and Dan, you can share your thoughts too.
It's a tricky one. Yeah, maybe I think I'll use the word disruptive, but positively.
I love that.
Yeah, I would probably tell the story I was telling the two of you the other day, which is it makes me feel a little bit vulnerable in the sense that, I think we have to do new things. We have to try new things that are uncomfortable for us. We might not have typically put out that type of content, or we might not have thought about things in such a way. And I think that's difficult for people to appreciate or to take that next step. But I think once you do and you can see the results, then it pays off.
Yeah, for sure. My one word, Parrish said crucial. I love that. Mine is excited. For the folks on the line that work in comms, and my colleagues have heard me say this probably so much that they're sick of hearing it. Like, this is one of those moments that I think we'll all look back on and be like, wow, like the world changed, right? Like years ago, maybe it was email and media pitching, and kind of changing that relationship, or SEO was certainly one of those moments in inbound marketing, but this feels like something where PR and a lot of the stuff that for years has been hard to measure and maybe felt less valuable, like PR really has a seat at the table. So I am, yes, maybe a little, uh, uh, you know, careful to see how and curious to see how things are going to play out, but certainly more excited than anything else. All right, so everyone knows how to use the chat feature, so we can expect questions. That's good to know. Let's just spend a couple of minutes before we really get into the heart of the conversation, talking about what is GEO. I think this has been the term that everyone has started to gravitate toward, but you may see it as AEO, generative search optimization, generative SEO, AI visibility. There's no shortage of kind of 3-letter terms or 4-letter terms around this, but GEO seems to be where the industry is headed. It is a sister to SEO, but certainly different. It's very much focused on the answer layer, not necessarily showing up in rankings, but really prioritizing clarity, authority, visibility, the content itself, rather than the link. And I think that's a core difference. And these AI engines really synthesize, weigh, and decide what stakeholders see. They are a gatekeeper, and we really talk about them now to our clients as an audience that you have to consider just as you would, prospective buyers or prospects. Why does this matter? Zero click is probably going to be a term in 2026 that we hear more than we want to, and just as much as GEO, and we're certainly hearing it from our clients. They're seeing traffic go down, and that is because folks are not clicking through to their websites as much as they used to, and we can certainly talk about this maybe in a little bit, but they're looking at they're doing searches in these engines, and we saw that even in our small sample at the top of this call. And by 2028, it's projected that AI-generated results are going to overtake organic search traffic. We'll see if that happens sooner. And I imagine this number is already out of date, but 2.5 billion prompts happen in ChatGPT every single day, nearly 200 million users, and that is, one of several LLMs that folks are using. So clearly audiences are going to these AI platforms to get information. And we really view that as PR's new power, right? Generative AI answers, they need that structured, trusted content that PR provides. Earned media does it, press releases do it, which Dan will certainly talk to us about. We see branded content drive that as well. So if PR can drive visibility and authority in AI's answer layer, we need to make sure that our brands that we represent are there. Muckrack recently did a report that I thought was really, really compelling that said 95% of AI links that are being cited are from non-paid media. So that's your earned media coverage. And of that total 95%, almost half, just shy of half, are looking at information that has some level of recency. The latest, the what's new, the recent, which means that this is not a set it and forget it type of exercise and program. It really needs to be iterative so that the engines have something to crawl and to find and to serve up when audiences are asking them for answers. So Dan, that is a good segue. We know that, and I'm going to stop sharing so we can see you, see your face better. We know that press releases have had a moment recently, thanks to everything that's happening with GEO. Maybe for folks that aren't familiar with that, can you kind of tell us the state of releases in GEO and how you guys are thinking about it?
Yeah, sure. So I think, to your point, um, press releases, much like other forms of content, are having a bit of a renaissance at this moment. And part of the reason for that is because you have to understand, what do the LLMs like to consume? I like to use the word eat, right? It's lunchtime for me, so maybe that's what's top of mind. So, the models themselves, right, are structured in a way where they like different types of content. And it's actually funny because today we're releasing a framework that we call SOAR, just an acronym so people can kind of remember what types of content they like. And so the S stands for structured content. And so we'll get into in a minute here what that means, but think of that as like making sure that your headline is correct, making sure that you are using bullets, making sure you're following through with not just jumping from one topic to the next topic and then coming back to the first topic. So the structure is really important. The O stands for originality, right? They're looking for content that you can't get anywhere else, that's new, that's going to, they like that information that is brand new. The third thing they're looking for is the A, which is authority. And so they're looking for content that exists on authoritative websites. It just so happens that press release distribution platforms like Globe Newswire have very high authoritative scores because of the vetting process that we go through to make sure that the content that's published on these sites is truly vetted and trusted. Same as your own brand's website. So one of the tips and tricks is make sure that if you're issuing a release, to make sure that it's posted on your own website. And then the R stands for recency, right? They're looking for you to continuously update content on a regular basis. And so what we've spent some time looking at is, as a press release distribution organization, how can we help organizations that are sending press releases that historically were written for journalists to generate earned media? Now you have a choice, which is, do you only write for that audience or do you write for the LLMs? And so what we're saying is you have to write for both. The good news is that you can write for both in one single document. And if you do that, unlike its AEO's sister SEO, let's just call it, right, which took years of time to build up credibility and links and backlinks to rise to the top of the SEO performance, AEO can take days, if not weeks, before you can rise in terms of the site being cited in answers. And so that's what's really exciting, is that when you go and post a question in ChatGPT, one of the types of content that the models like is a press release, but only if you write it correctly, right? If you write it in the format of answering a question versus a statement. So that's just a little bit. Happy to provide some other examples, but that's what's going on right now. And I think, again, whether you use the SOAR framework or you use, other acronyms, it's just important to remember the importance of structure, originality, authority, and recency.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about some of those best practices for writing? I think, we advise our clients, as you just said, like you can do both. You can still have a document and a release that is very media friendly and gets across the messages to the market that you want, that journalists are going to write off of, that have images and graphics and all of that, but also like answer the question so that the LLMs read it. Is it
Yeah.
subheads? Is it bullets? Like talk a little bit more about some of that.
Yeah, and in a minute I can happy to share even a case study that kind of demonstrates this, and I think will really ring true. So the first thing is, yes, your headline. It's really important that it is, an easy to read headline that answers a question. Okay. The second thing is the subheader needs to reinforce the headline. It can't be a completely different piece of content. You then need to have front-loaded structure. So you want 1 to 2 paragraphs at the top that is your executive summary, summarizing all the rest content. So think about it, right? Again, I'm going to just talk for a second about the differences between SEO and AEO. SEO like super long form content, right? As much content as you can produce. AEO models like summarized content because it's looking for that information in a quick format. And so if you put that summary right up front, it knows how to find it and what to think of it. Then you get into the meat. And so this is where I would say bullets, headers, bold, clear messaging, right, on individual lines. You even get into things, and this is like a funny one that we found. People were posting images in their press releases, which is great, right? You want to put multimedia in your releases, but they would name the image one
Mm.
or image ABC. And the models don't know what to do with that. And so versus if you actually name the image what it actually is depicting, they consume it better. And so they will like that image and they will reuse it. And so those are just like some of the small things that you can do. I always say those are the visible structural elements of a press release. Then there are also invisible items, like, for example, the metadata and the JSON that's behind the press release. And so this is really important when you're looking at different press release providers, right? Is your content buried in the JSON, 2 pages down? The model won't get there. Okay. It'll ignore it versus you have to bring that right to the top. And so that's some of the things that we've worked on at Globe Newswire to kind of perfect in the background the model. Other things like search tags. Okay. Being able to choose the right tags with your release. Again, think of it. The model is looking to say, I'm going to build almost like a mini word cloud in my head. And so if you give them the words that you want this article or this press release to be known by, that's the type of stuff that it's looking for. And so that's what we found as some of the best practices. At the end, I'm happy to post a link to a blog that has actually like each of these different key takeaways for people to go look at. But those are just some of the things that we focus on when we're analyzing a press release and trying to determine how to improve it.
Great. That's super helpful. That link would be great. And for folks on the call that are V2 clients, we're doing all of this kind of as a best practice as we're writing releases. And I think it's been an interesting exercise over the past 6+ months to really reimagine what a standard press release looks like. It's forced us to break some of the rules that have been longstanding. And I think a big part of that is driven by GEO, but I think also just journalists behave a little bit differently now, right? Like they want to understand what a piece of news is without all of the jargon. So this GEO is a good forcing function, but I think it's been a long time coming that press releases need to get away from some of that archaic, very technical language anyway.
Yeah.
You mentioned a case study. Tell us about the
Yeah.
case study.
Yeah, so first of all, this is all brand new, right? Like this isn't something I want to make sure everybody is on the same page. Like this isn't 9 months old or a year old. This is in the last couple of months where this has started to unfold. So we took a look at thousands of releases and we happened to just say, let's just pick something in a space that isn't super obvious to everybody. So we looked at 2 lithium ion battery organizations. Both of them were issuing their Q3 earnings release, and it was in September. So September 18th and September 16th. Both companies have a similar market cap, similar size followers on LinkedIn, same number of institutional holders. And yet one was obviously structured differently to the other. And so the one that I'm referring to is a company called American Battery. Their press release on September 18th, in the first 30 days after it was issued, had 1,679 citations, meaning that people were going into ChatGPT, Perplexity, Claude, Gemini, right, and asking a question. And that individual press release was cited over nearly 1,700 times. The other company that issued the press release literally the 2 days before, same content, same results, right? Same size organization, was cited 73 times. And so you can see 1,700 to 73. And when you review the releases and you look at the headlines and you look at what images they named and you look at their table structure and you look at the bolding of certain bullet points and the summary that they have at the beginning, it becomes clear that you can see why the models preferred one type of content over the other. It wasn't the actual words in the presentation, like somebody was
Yes.
announcing something interesting. What then actually happened also is we said, well, let's just compare it to something else that also issued their earnings release, and it was a small company called Costco who issued their release at the in between those two dates. And so obviously Costco has a following that is 1,000 times the size of these lithium battery companies,
Yeah.
and their release was cited 500 times. And so if you think about it, right, why would a lithium battery get cited nearly 3.5 times more than Costco? Again, it comes down to what they were doing from a structure standpoint in their actual press release.
Yeah. The thing I love about GEO, while it's evolving quickly, is that it seems to be a lot of little things and little tweaks. It is not a full sale, throw out your old strategy and do something new. It's subtle things like even the image, naming the images. That's a very easy
Yep.
obvious thing that everyone should be doing and can be doing. You don't need fancy tools or, advanced understanding of this. It's just that awareness. Crystal asked a question that I was going to ask, so thank you, about the tools that you use to see the citations included in specific LLMs. I know Notified has a partnership. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? And then Emma, maybe you can talk about what Rocket is using.
Sure. Yeah. So real quickly, so we formed a partnership again about 60 days ago with a company called Profound, who specializes in citation data and information. So they have the data or the technology to actually be able to tell how many times every press release is being cited. And so when you log into the Globe Newswire platform and you look at your analytics, how many people read the press release, views, things like that, there's now a new widget that says citation data. And so via Profound, you can see how many times that individual press release was cited, not just overall, but how many times it was cited in ChatGPT versus Perplexity versus Claude versus the other LLMs as well. So, and I just think, again, this is where I think folks like yourself, Caitlin, and V2, right, have such an opportunity and an advantage in that you're hosting this session because you guys are the experts in helping organizations take advantage of this moment in time where literally within a matter of weeks, you can jump to the top of the list in terms of citations, which is a phenomenal opportunity for brands, especially in this world of zero click, where they're not going to all the usual places that they've been going to for information in the past.
From our side, we use Evertune, but very similar type of concept. How often are we showing? What's our visibility? And also what's our brand sentiment? So I'll talk a little bit more about it later, but we have a tool as well.
Great, yeah, and we've evaluated, I think, 6 or 8 tools. I think those are among the leaders. Profound seems to be the one that a lot of the our partners are selecting. So I think to like feed their data feeds. When we do audits for clients, we kind of couple the data coming out of those tools, and there are a lot of them right now, and we can share a full list after for folks who are interested, and some recommendations based on the ones we've evaluated. But we kind of couple that data with some recommendations on like what are phase 0 things you can do, things like adjusting how you write your press release, to phase 2, which is maybe looking at tier 2 or 3 media. There are outlets that come back in a lot of these in these audits that are very influential in AI results, but we are not prioritizing in a traditional PR program. They might not be talking to the buyer audience, the investor audience, the kind of employer brand audiences. So they're not part of our traditional PR prioritization, but they're very prevalent across different LLMs, the review sites, the kind of tech listicle type sites. So we've shifted some of our clients' media strategies based on those audit findings to say, okay, like, yes, we still want to go after the Wall Street Journal and the CIO.com, but we also need to think about this list of 17 AI tools site, because that's actually showing up, or our clients' competitors are there and we're not on that list. Excuse me. So Emma, let's talk about Rocket Software. We have had the fortunate position of being kind of a part of your extended team in this process, which we have enjoyed. We have learned a lot. And I think, as I mentioned at the top of the call, I think you guys are onto something in terms of how you're organized and how you're approaching this. So maybe share with everyone what that looks like.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we've enjoyed having you. I want to give a little bit of background about me. So I'm Emma Harney, as you said, Director of Web and Digital Experience. Mostly that means my day-to-day is focused on our website. How can we think about our customers' end-to-end journey from a digital perspective? And Rocket Software, we are a software company that offers products and solutions that helps our customers on their IT modernization journey. So one of the questions you asked me, Keelan, was how did we start thinking about GEO? I think, like most of you, we started noticing the uptick in LLM usage across the board, and we started proactively tracking, hey, how much of our site traffic is now coming from LLMs, and how is it starting to impact our organic traffic as well? And we saw all the same headlines as all of you did of SEO is dead, what's going to happen to
Uh,
the internet, what are our jobs? And I think out of those sort of crazy headlines, we started having conversations with a lot of our trusted partners. So V2 being one of them, we started just kind of asking, how's everyone thinking about this? Or what's the best place to start? And from those conversations, I think we realized that GEO is sort of different from SEO in a lot of ways, whether that be the sources it consumes or how to optimize. But more importantly, I think we realized that it is a cross functional approach that was needed. Um, so we started a group that we're affectionately calling the task force, which is made up of a bunch of our internal team members. So it's owned by my team. Owen, who I think is in the chat, runs it for us. But it has representation from analytics, creative, comms, and we also invited our partners. So V2 is involved. We have a UX agency that helps us, Circle and Square, and we have some technical advisors. And we kind of all come together on a monthly basis and we spend some time talking about what's everyone researching, what are the headlines, how is this further disrupting our space. But then we spend most of the time talking about a very tactical list of action items that's a shared list from all the people that are invited to this conversation. So that has been super helpful. And sort of where are we now with our GEO journey? We're seeing the same things that all of you are seeing in terms of LLMs are fundamentally changing the buying journey. Um, Sort of anecdotally, we are hypothesizing that people are doing a lot of their upfront research in LLMs, but still coming to site to validate that. We know that LLMs hallucinate and people are worried about that, but also come to site when they want to think about talking to somebody and sort of progressing down that buying journey experience. So um, we've seen an increase in our LLM reference to status increased over the whole year, and we've started focusing on sort of three main areas. One, while we know it's disrupting everything in the way that people use websites, the catch-22 of it all is that you need more digital content for the LLMs to consume. So we've armed our creative teams and all of our teams that generate content on best practices, everything we've already talked about here, question and answer, FAQs, structured bulleted lists. But we've also started thinking about the expanded sources. So it's not just websites anymore. It's also press releases, as we've been talking about here, social, forums, peer review sites, and many other things. We've worked with our comms team and V2 to come up with a really solid plan for those third-party references, and also have started to even increase our press release cadence a little bit as well. And then we also invested in a tool. We started talking about that, Evertune. How can we track our visibility and our sentiment over time? So we're really focused right now on getting a solid benchmark from our 2025 efforts, and then coming up with a roadmap for 2026 on where we can make the most impact. So I want to open up for questions.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
yeah.
have one immediate one, and then I'll happy to take any from the chat. How are you thinking about all of the models kind of collectively? Are you double clicking on like a Chat GPT versus the Gemini? Like, talk a little bit about that if you can.
Yeah, that's a great question. The answer is we are using our tool Evertune, but you can any one of these have similar references where you can see the amount of traffic coming from each source, and then I have been surprised to see how different these LLMs really behave, and they prioritize different things in terms of sources, and they're refreshed at different timelines. So I think we're trying to figure out where our audience is and focus there. But the good news is that the efforts you would make to impact one are probably the same elsewhere. That
Yeah.
structured content.
Yeah.
I did
Uh,
have a couple of overall takeaways, if that's helpful to maybe get.
yeah, let's hear them.
Well, I guess kind of in a funny way, we have a advisor that helps us enable AI usage internally, and she always says to us that AI is a team sport. And I think that as cheesy as it maybe is a great way of looking at GEO. We know it can't be one team that owns this, and we think that's actually like a really great thing because it helps expand the amount of impact that we can have. If all these teams are thinking about it, think about how much more we can accomplish. And same thing, there's no silver bullet. You got to have many little things. That's true with SEO too, right? But we can make more of an impact with GEO. And then just lastly, we know that there's a lot we don't know, and I think our secret has been not getting so bogged down by the things we don't know, and really just kind of working with a small group of dedicated people who are excited to learn and try new things and just start somewhere.
Yeah, I totally agree with that last sentiment. Some of these events I've been at the past couple of weeks, there's been this sense of camaraderie around how quickly it's moving, how there is no go-to authoritative source. Like everyone is learning. There is so much black box that no one knows or someone secretly knows, but all of us on the outside are trying to figure it out. And I think that cross collaboration, right? I really love that everyone can bring something to the table and work toward a result that is, especially for the comms people on the call, rewarding because it is measurable. We have heard from clients who say, and we've seen it even at V2, like this person said they came to us because they saw us on ChatGPT, and that is a metric or an anecdote that we just don't get typically when we're doing brand awareness programs and someone has to move like through a funnel and does not bring that up. So that's been rewarding for us at V2 and the clients that, are doing similar work to what you all are. I wanted to probe around the FAQs, which Emma, you mentioned, and Dan, I know we've talked with your team a lot about like issuing FAQs potentially over the wire. Talk a little bit about like what that looks like. Emma, do they live on your website? Are they navigatable? Like how are you doing that? And then Dan, maybe you can talk a little bit about like where the wire comes in potentially with that.
Yeah, we have a whole FAQ page, which we stood up in relation to this, but we also try to incorporate FAQs on a lot of our other pages as well. So it's one of the things we're working on. I think the good news also about all of this is that human beings also like FAQs. Like it is not just for LLMs. It also does help the actual people who are still going to come to your site at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I think, from our side, I go back to the same thing, which is we ask questions into ChatGPT and other models. And so if you think about it, what a better way to put it than to put an FAQ section in on your site or in your press release, because you're answering the questions that people are likely looking for answers from. And so again, the models like it if it's written in the exact same format of how they're trying to consume. So in other words, if I ask a question and you have an FAQ that asks the same question and then is followed by an answer, that is incredibly easy for it to sync up and to then post as part of the model or as part of the answer. And so that's what we're starting to see, is that people will not only, again, write the traditional content that they've had previously in a press release, but then they'll add a little FAQ section at the bottom of it. And so that's really helpful, again, in terms of just making sure that you're trying to maximize the use of the models in terms of showing up in their answers.
Yeah, that's great. I feel like that's one of the easiest hacks along with the
Yeah.
image naming, just FAQs. Emma, would love to hear what's something you wish you knew when you started down this journey. And I realize you're still probably in the early phases of it. Is there anything that you would do differently or, oh God, I wish I had known that on day one when assembling this group?
I think kind of over in the sentiment of not worried so much. Like I think getting started is the hardest part. And once you're started, the path kind of emerges in front of you. And we're still very much in our journey. But I think maybe just appreciating how much impact many different sources have. I definitely come from an SEO background, and you think that, okay, well, these algorithms are going to know what the most important, the most valuable and trusted sources are. And I think that we're seeing that it's kind of evening the playing field a little bit, which
Yes.
opens up to a lot of opportunity. but I kind of think appreciating that earlier on would have been useful.
Yeah, I would add one other thing for us. So when we turned on the citation data, the original idea was we thought, okay, the Costco's of the world, the big brands, they would be the ones that would see the majority of the citations being posted under their releases. And the reality, and we were shocked, was that it wasn't. I mean, yes, they do get answers, but a lot of smaller brands were showing up in the search results. For us, in the first 30 days, we had 13.2 million releases that were cited just in 30-day period. And so it wasn't all the Costco's and the big brands of the world. It was a lot of smaller organizations. And so the one piece I would just say to the audience or anybody that eventually watches this is don't think that this is only for large or recognizable brands. This is for everybody, right? And to kind of what Emma said, this is democratizing a lot of what used to happen in terms of search. You couldn't afford to show up at the top, right?
Yes.
Now all of a sudden you can, and it doesn't have to do with just how big you are as an organization. And that is exciting to me because I think it gives a lot of other organizations the opportunity to rise very quickly.
Yes. And conversely, if you are that big player, that category leader, you really have to work to protect that
Yeah.
or build that in this new arena. We did an audit for a client that is the very well established leader in their category. And, looked at a few different prompts and queries and the results. And what shocked everyone in the results was that there was this one very early stage, very young startup, didn't have any of the kind of credibility and clout that, traditionally we would think of, but they were showing up in some of the responses that our client brand wanted to be in. And we were very quickly able to look at the sources and kind of pivot our program to address that. But it was eye-opening of how quickly this, no-name brand got ahead of us in AI. So I think it works both ways. It's an opportunity for the small brands, and it's
Yeah,
a protection issue for the bigger ones.
absolutely.
I have one more question. So, attendees, if you have any questions, drop them in the chat now while I ask Emma and Dan my final question, which is the scary one, which is like, what keeps you up at night around all of this? Like, what are you worried about? What haven't you figured out? I know there's a lot that we all haven't figured out, but what are you still working on or focused on?
Go ahead, Emma.
Um, I think two things. One, the fact that the playing field is great and it's an opportunity, but I also think about how our brand is showing up. We can't control necessarily all of these sources, or it's a harder to influence some of them. And I don't know if you've seen this in your source analysis, but some of them are random pages that I would never have a million years have anticipated that I need to go think about. So I think partially that, but also I think because it is not something you can let up on, sort of being able to maintain that cadence of reviewing and optimizing takes a real concerted effort across lots of different people. So keeping people excited about it and motivated by it is something I just want to make sure we're focused on.
Yeah. I would say two things. One that's similar to yours, which is everybody needs to do a content inventory check, right? Because it will find pages that you created 2, 3 years ago. And so if you haven't updated that, it might be using that for the answer. And so it's important to have a tool like the one you mentioned, a Profound, to be able to see what's actually showing up. And so you can go correct those pages. So that's probably one. Is it's a little bit daunting, right? We all have a lot of inventory of content that's out there that needs to be reviewed. I would say the second one, somebody asked me this a few weeks ago about how do you then control, your employee base in terms of how they speak about an organization. And I think that's daunting as well because you've now got social, you've got all these different channels where people can be putting out a message about your brand or your organization or a certain topic. And if they post something in Reddit, that's just as possible of showing up in a result as it is, what the head of corp comms posts. And so it's really important, I think, from that standpoint, to go on the offensive with your team and probably to push out more messaging internally so that the consistency stays top of mind for people and people are not, out there creating their own, thoughts and content out there on the web. Because if you allow that to happen, now you've just created even more inventory of content that you need to go manage and control. So I would say, that would probably be the concerning piece for me for organizations, is those that do not go on the offensive and just kind of want to play defense and cleanup. That can be very dangerous.
Yes. Yeah. The whole notion that comms is really the steward of the story, and the spokespeople and the brand need to have messaging discipline has always been core to our job at V2 and the comms folks on the call. But I think you described it perfectly, Dan. Like that needs to be really tight and locked up so that, one, it's showing up and consistent for AI, and so hopefully other audiences are picking up a clear message wherever they may put it down. And that is becoming, I think, a little bit harder to control. So
Yeah.
certainly the thing that keeps me up at night is, the incorrect content and the wrong messages that are potentially showing up in these models, and not knowing what sources they may be until you see them appear in the results. So that constant monitoring, Emma, as you mentioned, I think absolutely critical.
I think it's also important to remember that these LLMs are also programmed to give people the answers that it thinks they want. So there's also only so much like influencing you can do, I
Yes.
think, with some of that. And someone told me recently that, today's AI is like the dumbest or the least sophisticated AI we will ever use. And like that rate of change, I think, takes all of us some getting used to. Just overall, I think the world of AI keeps me up at night sometimes.
Yeah. We joke around here a lot. We know too much about AI working in tech PR and tech comms that, we know how powerful it can be. So at least as it relates to GEO, we have some control over it. Well, thank you both for your time. Thank you to the attendees. I think the kind of key messages I took away from this conversation is obviously, visibility and trust in AI is critical, but the good news is you can address it. You can take it in bite-sized chunks, and we're all learning together. Many folks in the industry are. So certainly reach out to myself or V2 for folks on the line that want help with this, clients or non-clients. And I know Dan is a resource to all of our clients and his team at Notified. And Emma, I'm sure as a peer, you'd be happy to answer any questions offline.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much for participating.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.